Hi everyone. I am on hour 15 of my 24 hour challenge, which is the 24 and 24 for SAMS to raise visibility of the kind of work that we do at Samaritans and how we're here for our callers. And by creating a space so that we can have conversations about things that matter, we aim to reduce suicides because people feel like they can talk about the dark thoughts and dark feelings, and just the act of talking about things will reduce the weight, give you some space to just take another step and take another breath so that you can find a way to kind of move forward. So in doing that, that's what I'm doing. I'm raising funds for my branch because we need money to keep the lights on, and for telephony for our CRM, which is Salesforce, and also training. Um, and biscuits and chocolates are really important to Samaritan's brunch, I will tell you. So I hope that you can watch and listen and create that space for yourself as well, and also donate. So in this current session, I have my wonderful friend Sam, who is going to talk about neurodiversity in consulting and as an architect. Hi, Sam.
Hello, hello. Good to see you again, and good to see everybody who's out there in virtual world.
Yeah, thank you for putting the topic forward. I would love to hear your story. I've listened to you at so many events already, and for you to come up with this, I would say it's not surprising a little bit, but I'm just like so fascinated to hear what your insights and your learnings from your own journey.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess the starting point is the consulting world. I guess the basics. I actually entered into consulting pretty much straight after graduation from university because I went through uh, going through my degrees plural, um, I realised during that time that actually consulting was where I wanted to end up. Um, and recently, I've been reflecting, especially given the prompt of this session from yourself on when it started. And it was definitely during that time, but I don't think I realized it at the time. That for me, I was always very active, always wanting to do different things, always interested in new things. And when I sort of reflect on it, in a way, that was a neurodiverse trait, right? The somewhat lack of focus, but then when I find something, the sort of hyper focus. I'm not diagnosed as being neurodiverse, but I know that I have traits that would probably lead to that or suggest that. And as I've gone on, I sort of recognize them more and more and more. And sometimes it's sort of worrying, sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's sort of like, oh, that's what it is. Quite. So I always knew that consulting was where I wanted to be, and I think many people. I don't know what you think, because you've been in the consulting world for some time as well. But for me, it was the variety, the concept of no 2 days being the same, no two
Mhm.
projects being the same, no two environments being the same, the work changing, fairly regularly, would keep my interest, and that is actually how it sort of played out. Um, so yeah, I guess that was the first sort of reflection I had. Um, but I guess sort of asking the question back,
Mm.
what have you seen in consulting that sort of lends itself um, or becomes a challenge, I guess, um, for neurodiverse
It's
folks?
it's really, really, really interesting. So the just the concept of neurodiversity wasn't something that came across my vocabulary until my sons. Uh, so I've got twin boys, and they are the youngest in their year. So as they were, kind of growing up, year one, two, three, I had two to compare,
Hmm.
where one would react to things the way that I would, the other one would be different. Things, if things weren't right, they weren't right, and it had to be right. And for example, his teacher would say things like they'd be given sheets of paper to write on, and he'd fixate on the corner of his paper that was bent, and he'd be busy trying to make it perfect, kind of thing. So there were a few things, and it wasn't until we changed school that the new. So we changed school because the teachers said they're the youngest, they're still growing, but I kind of knew there was something wrong. And a friend of ours who worked at the council said, um, you need to get it checked out, and the
Mm.
state school does not have the resources to do that for you, because he's not severe enough. It'd be long waiting list. So we went to a different school, and teacher picked it up, and he got diagnosed. And that's kind of where I saw certain traits like very last minute. And
Hmm.
GCSEs was a crazy time for us, and he decided to pick two subjects that were very heavy in the coursework. So it wasn't until then that it crossed my path, the ADHD, neurodiversity. I think I'm pretty neurotypical,
Hmm.
because like I said, I've got two boys, and one will behave the way that I would on certain, and the other one would be different. And I do see that in now looking back,
Hmm.
and how some of my teams, presented themselves. I could see, oh, you probably got
Mm.
ADHD, especially with the hyper focus thing, you know, that I had to learn to step back and say, okay, you have, for a normal person, you've got user story that would take, 16 hours to do, split over 2 days or 3 days if you had another project, blah, blah. And I would expect a steady rate of progression.
Hmm.
Whereas for somebody, I think with ADHD, was I'd step back because I they wouldn't be ready yet until
Right.
the very last minute, and I had to rely on the fact that, okay, so your work is good work,
Mm.
regardless of the fact that you did it all, within the last 24 hours or something like that. That was the only time I kind of, on hindsight, looked around and went, ah, okay,
Mm.
that was
Yeah,
why.
that's really interesting because I've come to know only recently that you've got twins. Actually, I'm on the reverse side, so I'm actually a twin. Um, and and I don't know whether we myself and my twin both sort of recognise neurodiverse traits, but I certainly have in my years. And it's interesting what you say about how people work, because I've noticed in other people, and I think being more aware of the way I happen to work and where I'm more productive, as you say, or more responsive versus when I'm not, has made me more aware of other people and how they also work. So that concept that you described there of perhaps not making it much progress, but then leaving leaving it until quite late on, is something that I see quite a lot in myself, and I have to sort of recognize when it's happening. In a way, practice a little bit of self-awareness in recognizing, okay, why is that happening? What is it that's holding me back, or slowing me down, that I need to overcome? And I certainly don't know whether it's a neurodiverse trait. I'm not an expert, and like I say, haven't been diagnosed. But I think you know, obsessive compulsive and also perfectionism, um, seems to come along with those traits, in that when you look at a task, it might be too noisy or too busy and unclear as to how you're going to work your way through it. So it takes quite a lot of effort sometimes to even get started, to to figure out, okay, well, I need to do this, and then I need to do that, and then I need to do that, to get to a point where I've got what I expect to come out. But equally, on the flip side, is my view of and sometimes people's views of what the output needs to be like is so perfect and so ideal that it can stop you, because it's like, how do I even get to that point, if you see what I mean? It's
Mm-mm.
stifling, and it's, it's quite it feels like a mountain to climb. And actually, when I was thinking about, this conversation, one of the sort of topics that I came to mind was phrased as mountains we climb, and it's different for different people,
Mhm,
I guess.
mhm,
The So, one of the questions I think we talked about before was, um, you know when I'm trying to do some work, I might work really late because I've left it too late. You know,
mhm,
I haven't made the progress I wanted to. I want to get to a point where it's in a good state, that that I've forgotten the term now. It's so the perception of justice and what is right and what is quality and what is, appropriate, is very strong. So I want to get to that point, and I won't leave it alone, the hyper focus, until I get to that point. I'm not comfortable or satisfied until I get to that point. But that means if you leave it late, it becomes a bigger mountain to climb. The the question is that a boulder, that sort of perfectionism, or the pursuit of a certain level of quality, is that a boulder that's going to hold you back from climbing the mountain,
mhm,
or is it actually a rope? Because without that, perhaps you wouldn't achieve the same quality. And and when is good enough good enough?
mm. I have a question for you. So, um, my oldest son is the one, with ADD, and he's very handy, and he's so lovely in so many ways. Um, However, just talking about the way he was doing his art GCSEs, and I'm trying to think about, like, for yourself, your CTA journey. It just feels like something that you need a high degree of organization and planning and discipline, and doing it even when you don't feel like it. That kind of graph that is not an externally applied thing. It comes from you, I would think, and I'm wondering how. Tell me about your
Yeah.
journey. Was it easy?
So so I think I've talked about it before, but the I found it hard, right? And I don't think I'm alone in feeling that. Part of the um, part of the issue is a lot of those traits, and I would admit that actually a lot of my self-discovery or self-awareness of the neurodiverse traits came from that mountain that I was trying to climb. Um, and there were a lot of what felt like boulders along the way. Um, I would agree that it does require a lot of organization, and then at the same time, I would say that doesn't mean that those who experience neurodivergence, and are successful in that quest, have necessarily been organized in getting there. Um, in fact, I knew I wasn't, and it was a challenge. It was a constant challenge daily. You're absolutely right. Getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning to do 2 or 3 hours of of study every day was a real challenge. But what made it comfortable was the fact that it was every day, that it
Mm,
was consistent, and that it was almost, I didn't need to think about it. It was just what I did. And that frequency and consistency meant I didn't need to think about the structure. I didn't need to think about the organization
mm,
of it.
mm,
We, a lot of people say that it takes a village to climb that mountain, and it was only through, I don't think I've said this to them in the in the open before, but it was only through the study group that I was part of at the time that provided that consistency of, there's always something to talk through. There's always a challenge to discuss. There's always something that I was learning at that time in the morning that helped, in a way organically or incidentally create the structure and the organization of it. Um,
mm,
so so it wasn't my doing. Because I don't think I would be that organized. But once I had that in place, the structure of it and the consistency of it actually played well to to those neurodivergent traits that I felt. Now, I definitely found more discovery towards the latter stages, and I've told quite a few people that it was quite rocky, and I would say that in the last sort of 3 to 4 months, I hit a point where I was quite low, in fact, and the reason was because I was trying to sort of practice and practice and practice, and I had this utopian ideal of what good looked like in my
mm,
head that I was trying to achieve, but that in a way was blocking me from actually performing in mocks and
oh,
because I was looking at a 12-page scenario
mm,
or challenge and trying to ingest and comprehend so much information all at the same time, trying to multitask, reading through whilst also solutioning, and it just the sheer amount of challenge in that
mm,
was and plan out like where do I need to focus,
mm,
the tons and tons of thoughts that happen at that time meant that I was struggling with timing in general. And talking about working late, I think it got to a point where one of the mock exams that I did saw me get to about 1 o'clock in the morning. By this time, I'd spent three and a half hours
mm,
trying to solve this scenario, and I was saying to myself, how can I even succeed? Like how can I climb this mountain when I'm not able to
mm,
get it done even in a reasonable amount of time? Um, and that was a real challenge because you sort of face some honesty and some truth. Um, but I decided that I'm not going to stop. I'm going to take as long as it takes to get through this scenario. And it ended up being about 3:30 in the morning when I
oh,
stopped after 6 hours of trying to solution. But what it did was it highlighted to me that something wasn't right. I was facing a challenge and I didn't know what it was. And I think that's where the self-awareness came in, because it made me sort of go back and in a way sort of analytically look at, well, what was I doing and what was I feeling at those various points in trying to overcome this challenge.
mm,
And I think a lot of people who face neurodiversity in a consulting world, and certainly as architects, might feel the same, right? Is
mm,
why was I not able to respond in a way that I thought I should be, or why was I not able to come up with an answer, in or solve that problem? And it's not necessarily the problem that is the problem. it is actually understanding what the way we think and what's influencing that I found interesting.
So you said it doing the exam practice exam made you realize something was wrong.
Mm.
Can you say more about that?
Mm. So I think the mess the sort of narrative in my head was it shouldn't take this long.
Mm,
It shouldn't take this long.
mm,
Um, Other scenarios that I've done that have been smaller have been done in a reasonable amount of time. What was it about this situation that was
mm,
causing that extreme sort of observation? And what I found was that when I went back over it, I sort of timed myself in what I was doing, and that gave me some information to say, right, why is this part of what I'm doing taking so long? Or what is it about this situation that I can't seem to comprehend? It's those things. And what I found with after doing a bit of research was actually there's ways that I can accept that that is the that's the way my mind works, and try and reprogram in a way. So the ability to read a 12-page document in 20 minutes um, or less is a challenge at the best of times, but realizing that the reason it was taking me much longer than that was because I was trying to multitask. And I was
mm,
trying to multitask because I felt like I needed to, at that time, figure out too many things, whereas actually I needed to let my mind do the work, trust that um, it will find a way,
mm.
and actually focus on the one thing, which was just reading the document, and my mind would sort of assimilate that information on its own. Um, Meant that I could get through it in 25 or 30 minutes
Okay.
in practice.
I'm trying to unpick that. Okay, so from what I'm hearing, and if I were to like use an analogy, because you said you did slightly smaller or easier mocks within a time frame.
Mm,
This particular one was, took you longer. Um, it sounds to me like, if I were to apply to, let's say, a math problem, I'm like, I did this math problem and it was fine, did it in the time, could solve it. This one took me longer.
mhm.
Now, I would not have gone down the path of there is something wrong here. What is it about this math problem that's causing my brain to not work right? Do you know what I mean? It
Mm.
doesn't flow. What was it that made you ask that question as opposed to this is just a much trickier one, which I just need to find a different way of approaching, as opposed to, hey, my brain doesn't seem to be able to.
Well, yeah, there was an element of the actual scenario itself, right?
Mm,
And what the characteristics of that. Um, we see this in consulting with complex problems to solve, and architecture, with complex problems to solve. Quite a lot of unknowns. That was a good example. There was a lot of unknowns in this one. It didn't. There were ambiguities and
mm-hmm,
contradictions in
mm-hmm,
it, and obviously, with um, with a focus on detail, those things matter more when you see them. When you're a little bit neurodiverse,
mm,
so those things in combination, I think it was too many moving parts, if you
mm,
will, um, that created too many thoughts and too many, sort of speculative
mm,
ideas, that meant it felt like noise, if you see what I mean. It felt like I couldn't pick a way forward. I couldn't see the way forward, you know.
right, no,
And so quite a lot of time was actually spent trying to look at it from different perspectives, trying to assimilate that information and go, well, if this and that, and all the permutations. Well, if I did this, then that would happen, and you play out that scenario and where things would go wrong or where it would be suboptimal to do so, the just sheer volume of thoughts because of the ambiguity or because of the contradiction caused a block, right?
Mm. Mm.
Um,
So, okay, looking back, you're talking about how you kind of like notice things. Is what can is there any support you wish you got that would have helped you in
um,
your
yeah, so definitely. So what I've come to realize now is when you recognize or at least sort of take a step back and notice um, that what you might see on the outside might be due to something else, um, then actually having that sort of insight to say when you see someone not making progress, or whether it's me, telling myself, or whether it's me seeing that in someone else or someone seeing it in me, it may be because there's information that they need, right? That they or there's a decision that they need some support to help. So that's an insight. Equally, um, if they're in an environment where there's just too much information,
Mm.
bombarding someone or giving them more information can actually be counterproductive. So understanding that actually that's not necessarily conducive to getting the output that we need, um, you know, or helping to organize, the information with them is another way. So saying, at the moment, I'm increasingly finding in the larger scale and more complex environments that lists of things are like saviors. um, so if I had these insights to say, right,
Mm.
when I'm when I see this happening, this is what could help. When I see that happening, this is what could help. And those little tools, that I wish I had those at the time. I sort of had to organically find them, but actually having those, and having someone recognize those
Mm.
would have helped a lot.
Okay. So, in terms of like, so you got a final point, which was looking forward,
Mm.
right? So, how do you see, let's say AI, how do you think AI can help, you know, the those who are neurodiverse within the consulting space? What are some of the things that you,
Yeah,
tool wise?
it's an interesting one because I think we all use AI increasingly these days because as the tools evolved, so has our creative use, I'll say. Um, Sometimes successful, sometimes not.
Mm.
Sometimes effective, sometimes less so. Um, but I think for neurodiverse um, individuals, certainly the sheer volume of information can be distilled. Now it's a double-edged sword because certainly in ADD scenarios, level of granularity of information is in some cases needed because that certainty and the sort of fidelity to make decisions is needed. But equally, not enough information can be can hold folks back. Um, but being able to sort of write a prompt that says, I need this level of detail, or I need
Mhm.
you to summarize this, and I need you to back it up with cited evidence, creates that sort of balance that can really help speed up or complement a neurodiverse trait.
Mm.
So yes, I think in the future, I think my lessons learned would be use more of the tools. Be I don't necessarily wish anyone to go through the experience that I had in what I call rock bottom, but
Mm,
um, but I would sort of encourage folks to be kind to themselves and sort of stop and ask themselves the questions of, well, why am I feeling like that? What is it I'm feeling, first of all? Why am I feeling like that? Um, you know, how comfortable am I with what I'm discovering? And that's more about the acceptance of it. Um, and then being patient
mm,
to sort of uncover and explore. Okay, well, you know, uh, I know when I'm, you know, being a perfectionist now. Um, most of the time, I know when other times when people say to me, "We don't need that level of detail," and there's a discomfort that I feel inside of, "No, you don't need that level of detail. I need that level of detail." You know, and that's not about the work. It's not about other people. That's about me. Um, and I need to sort of accept that that's not necessarily others' needs, but it is my need.
mm, mm,
Um, so that's one. Um, and then use of the tools, you know, from a technology perspective, as well. But also watching out for others. So if you see some of those characteristics, um, you know, then sort of be kind, um, and actually ask questions to understand whether any of those underlying traits are at play, because actually that's, you know, uncovering those can be like a light bulb moment for
mm.
you and for them, um, to just ask the question.
So if I were to summarize, I like that very much because quite a few things that you've said has been a running theme through the conversations I've had today. The first one, as you say, is to be kind to yourself, especially when you're hitting a boulder.
Hmm.
Is it an obstacle or not? And then self reflection in asking yourself questions. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I encountering these things? Why am I thinking what I'm thinking? And then um, it might be, you get an answer, then you have to be patient and have grace, because this is how your brain works. You just need that level of detail, even if no one else understands why. But your understanding of yourself improves the more you do the work of being kind and asking questions and then being patient as you work through them. And then you had a point about using AI tool to help you on your way. And then you flipped around to watching out and applying the first three things on others, which is being kind
Yeah.
because you don't know, you know, how they're struggling and why they're struggling, and then helping them as they work through their questions as well. So I really like that. It goes from, internal and tools to help you manage. Now you understand yourself more, and then, just bringing it out to the people around you. So that's very nice. Very, very nice wrapping
Yeah.
to take away to your session. So thank you very much, Sam. I This was a really good conversation, and I appreciate you very much. Just before we kind of wrap up, I have to remember to do this, which is, everyone, thank you for listening in. I know Chris was listening, and Paul was listening, and whoever else is listening, please donate. Me and my branch will be grateful. But also at the same time, if you've listened to this session, take the takeaways and, do the inner work, and also to, lift up your head and look and help other people who might be, as Sam said, might have those traits, and if you're aware, to just help them on their journey. So thank you very much for your time today, Sam. I really
No
appreciate
problem.
you.
Appreciate you too, and everyone else.
All right, take care. I will see you